My name is Grace Mooney Anderson. I'm the treasurer of PRISM, and it is my pleasure to be here today at the Affirming LGBTQ plus student lecture. This event is meant to highlight some of the history of queer rights at Hope College and spark continued discussion. This afternoon, we will hear discussion from Dr. Jane Dickie. Immediately after the lecture, we will have a Q&A discussion where you will be able to ask questions via a Google form. To submit any questions, please scan the QR code on the screen, or we will have note cards for you to write your questions down, and we will submit them online. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the land we stand on. Together, we acknowledge that we gather as Hope College on the traditional land of the Peoria, Potawatomi, Odawa, and Ojibwa peoples, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. As a community, we recognize the ever-present systemic inequities that stem directly from past wrongdoings. We acknowledge this long history of injustice and commit to educating ourselves and our community as we seek to honor the legacy and the culture of the Indigenous peoples. We are grateful to PRISM, the Grow Advocacy Council, and the Center for Diversity and Inclusion for their support in sponsoring this program. Again, thank you so much for coming to this lecture. I hope you will enjoy it, but more importantly, I hope you will learn something new that will inspire you. Next, we will be hearing from PRISM's phenomenal president, Skylar DeWitt, who will be sharing a poem.
This is a poem titled, "A Future Where All May Bask in Love's Light," written by yours truly. In shadows cast by stained glass panes, where echoes of whispers fuel silent pains, there lies a place where hope's denied, where queer hearts wrestle unseen, untied. Within the walls of a non-affirming creed, where love's spectrum shrinks and voices recede, a solitary struggle, a silent plea for acceptance, for love, for identity free. In hollowed halls where norms dictate, queer souls navigate a precarious fate, bound by fear, yet longing to soar, their truth suppressed behind closed doors. In classrooms where knowledge blooms, their essence stifled, their spirits consumed. Each lecture, each lesson, a subtle divide, as they pondered their worth, their place, their stride. Beneath the gaze of judgment's eye, they yearned to flourish, to bloom, to fly. Yet shackled by doctrines, by ancient decree, they hide in the shadows, they long to be free. But even in the darkness, a flicker remains, a spark of defiance, of courage that reigns. For within each heart, a beacon ignites, a beacon of hope in the darkest of nights. They gather in whispers and clandestine spaces, their presence a testament to resilient graces. For they are the warriors, the bold and the true, navigating storms, yet shining through. So let the winds of change begin to blow. Let Hope College's walls with acceptance glow. For every soul, regardless of hue, deserves to flourish, to love, to pursue. In a world where love knows no bounds, may all find solace on liberated grounds, and may the struggles of the past ignite a future where all may bask in love's light. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maddie Zaitunian, and I serve as the Culture and Inclusion Representative for PRISM. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker today for the Affirming LGBTQ plus lecture, Dr. Jane Dickie. Dr. Jane Dickie was a professor of psychology and women's studies at Hope College from 1972 to 2012, and it was in that work that she developed a calling and passion to seek justice for all people, regardless of gender, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, class, and ability. Jane is a member of Hope Church ever since the RCA decided to ordain women at a synod in the mid-1970s. She truly feels that God nudges her and calls her not so subtly to speak out on these issues and to act as an ally. She served on the board of Room for All, responding to the inclusive love of God. She reports, "It is my great joy over the decades, living on a 20-acre farm with gardens, occasionally horses, goats, and chickens, and traveling and living internationally with my life partner, Larry." She particularly likes being a grandma and visiting her 2 grown children, Jennifer and Sarah, and her grandchildren, Dorothy, Jane, Asa, and Jonas. Born and raised in Central City, Chicago to social workers, Jane arrived at Hope in 1972 with a new PhD and as a young mother of 3 to teach developmental psychology. 50 years, 1 more child, and 4 grandchildren later, she really understood development, for it is in practical applications in real life that the theories and research come alive. She served as founder and director of Women's and Gender Studies for 17 years, and her great joy is living on her farm and traveling. Huh? It's on. Yeah. It's okay, a little misprint. But please give a warm welcome to Dr. Jane Dickie.
She also gave me an extra child, which was pretty amazing. Are you out there? How about I adopt you? That would be great. Okay. Well, let us begin in gratitude and prayer. I've asked Javon Willis, who is the director of the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, to read a prayer that was written by one of my former colleagues on the Room for All board.
Hey God, it's us. In one of your love letters to us, it is written, "For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord." So God, thank you for giving us breath as a reminder to lean into the joy of life. As our chest rises with anointed wind, it represents your promise to be with us always, and with an exhale, your living word is sent out and finds roots in the lives of all of your children. Help us all to get it. As long as breath expands our chest, we have yet another chance to be your earthly presence, yet another chance to get it right and sow seeds of joy into the lives of our siblings. The siblings who are marginalized, the siblings who are celebrated, the siblings who are whole, and the siblings who are broken. We are all recipients of your transformative love that surpasses all understanding. When we wake, joy. When we gather, joy. Where we be, joy. When we love each other, show enough joy. For the sweet, sweet gift of joy, God, we say thank you. So God, whatever we came here to get this evening, add more joy to it. Press it down, shake it up, and have it running over. Because we know you are able to exceed our every expectation. Jehovah Nissi, we thank you, and in the name of your baby boy Jesus, we pray. Amen.
I think I also have to turn this on just a minute. Okay, there we go. I think it's also important that we let our voices be heard in song. And the song we're going to sing is called For Everyone Born. And some of you out there actually have sheets of music, and you're going to sing so loudly, you're going to carry us all. And the wonderful, beautiful Will Walker has agreed to accompany us on piano. And I'm asking now for two of my colleagues to come up who have really great voices to sing next to my skinny little one.
You're overselling us.
Do you want to take it over there closer to them? Would that be better? Do you want to take it over by the piano? Just pull it out. Maybe not. Yeah. Okay, why don't we go over there and we can sing together. All right, get ready, y'all. Well, you want to play it introduction? You're going to play, he'll play it through once, and then we're going to go for it. Oh, that's right. We're not there. Oh, not yet. For everyone born, a place at the table. For everyone born, clean water and bread. A shelter, a space, a safe place for growing. For everyone born, a star overhead. And God will delight, we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For gay and for straight, a place at the table. Transgender and queer in one single tree, engaging each gift and blessing each covenant. For gay and for straight, a new way to be. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. Yes, God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy. For everyone born, a place at the table, to live without fear and simply to be, to work and speak out, to witness and worship.
unborn the right to be free. And God will delight when we are creators of justice and joy, compassion and peace. And God will delight when we are creators of justice, justice and joy.
Thank you.
It's okay, this one's off.
Yeah, okay. So, how has Hope College worked to be truly welcoming and inclusive of gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer folks and allies? Recording this history is about the safety and health and well-being and happiness of colleagues, friends, family members, and most importantly, Hope College students. We recognize the inherent worth of each person and the love that God has and we should all have for all people. So who is the we of which I speak? All of us who have worked for full inclusion, and this lists a number of them whose faces are there. And some of them go all the way back to the first student listed there, Jeff Howard, an alum, who was the first one to begin to record this history, and others have picked up on it since. As we look at the recent history, we see an uneven march toward full inclusion. Faculty included LGBTQ perspectives, authors, research in their courses. Students created underground support groups with support from allied faculty and staff. Faculty and students wrote documents of inclusion and petitions demanding change. They hosted events to hear one another's stories and organized well-attended panels. Faculty and staff who believed in the full inclusion of queer folks put a student-designated rainbow-colored sticker labeled Safe Zone on their doors. Alumni, faculty, and students published their stories in the Anchor, invited queer speakers to campus, and took field trips to Affirming conferences. In all this, they proclaimed the need for hope to be inclusive and affirming. There have also been challenges, often from administrators, sometimes by powerful, wealthy donors, and sometimes from faculty or staff who believed, quote, hate the sin, but love the sinner. Words in the eyes of those targeted, stinging with rejection. As we look at the actions and reactions over time, the questions arise, when does change happen? Who initiates the shifts and why? When are the stories behind the restrictive policies and the resulting resistance? One thing is clear. This sort of inclusive change doesn't happen with one person. It takes a community like many of you in the audience. We believe that I spoke of, believe the most powerful change agents are stories, which can be weaved into a narrative that presents a more complete picture of how hope has changed. For this presentation, events we searched in people's files, Facebook posts, Anchor articles, personal communications, and the campus archives. Here we sample stories by those who are most affected that illustrate the college's welcoming or excluding actions over the last 50 years. I've invited current members of PRISM to read stories that alumni have shared with me in order that they could be shared with you. PRISM is an affirming organization on campus for LGBTQ and allied students. The call and the response in the pamphlet that you may have picked up details these events over the last 50 years. 1975. The story begins when a courageous student, John Stout, created the first publicly announced support group for lesbian and gay students and unnamed sexual and transgender students. John Stout arrived at Hope College in 1975, determined to make himself straight before he graduated. In an Eagle Scout way, he set yearly goals which had him heterosexually married by the time he graduated. By his sophomore year, he realized that he instead better work on accepting himself as he was and making the world a safer place for gay and lesbian people. As a junior, he wrote a letter to the anchor concluding, quote, "Only through unconditional acceptance can heterosexuals help homosexuals open their closets and thus come in contact with the light." Nearly 2,000 years ago, one bold man encouraged each of us to let our lights shine on our fellow humans in doing good works to glorify our Heavenly Father. Are we following his counsel? John's initiative began when a group of faculty presented to a standing room only crowd a panel speaking about underlying and support for gay people. Some responded as positively, such as Sharon Carnahan, a student at the time and a student ally, while others responded with biblical verses and condemnation. The attending gay students were closeted, but yet heard others expressing acceptance. With John leading the way, that small group found one another, and they were emboldened to reach out to others. They heard the call, and they courageously responded. The first step, moving from closeted and alone to closeted and together, was taken with justifiable fear. Rather than announce where they would meet, they had intermediary faculty members, Wayne Bolton in religion, some in this room may remember that saint, and me in psychology as initial contacts. The day the anchor came out with the letter inviting gay students and allies to meet, a student called me to ask where the gay students were meeting. Sensing some danger, I invited the student to come and speak with me in order to learn the location. The man on the other end shouted, "Fuck you, you queer lover!" In the background, I heard the laughter of a group of men. Clearly, it was not safe in 1977 for the gay students to be known. It took until 2001 for student leaders' names to be published in the Anchor directly, with no faculty and staff intermediaries. In the 1990s, students became more active. LGBTQ students and their allies continued to support one another. A student named Chris DeHaan, with other students, organized a well-attended week of LGBTQ affirming programming sponsored by supportive faculty in women's studies, psychology, theater, English, and religion. Avery will come up and read Chris DeHaan's story. I guess we have to turn this on. Maybe you know where. It needs to be turned on, I think. There, okay.
Chris DeHaan. It's not turned on?
It's on.
Chris DeHaan tells his story, Creativity and Education. Let's talk. My name is Christopher DeHaan, and I live in Los Angeles, California. I started at Hope College in the fall of 1990 after graduating from Holland Christian earlier that year. In the fall of 1994, I and several friends, some of whom identified as LGBTQ+, and some who counted themselves as allies, formed the Les-Bi-Gay Union. We were able to secure safe and anonymous meeting room space on campus, ironically, as it turned out, in Graves Hall, the very place where my father had his office and his classes. I should mention that my mother also worked on campus on the admissions office staff. Initially, our group meetings offered a wonderful, fun, healthy outlet to connect with others like us. About a year prior, a new, very conservative and highly outspoken chaplain, Ben Patterson, had taken over the chapel program. He and his team were energizing people in a way that we feared might be potentially virulent way, not only toward the student body as a whole, but also, and very specifically, to us as a group of individuals. Sadly, those fears hardened into reality, and there was indeed a growing sense of hostility on campus, and we didn't feel safe or welcome. And so it was the fall of 1994 and the very early part of 1995 that conversations were taking place on and around campus that seemed to question our presence at Hope College. And it is that context that, with the very invaluable guidance and moral and logistical support of our faculty allies, our group of students brainstormed, created, coordinated, publicized, managed, and successfully completed a week-long series of events of educational events, discussions, a screening, and other activities on campus, highlighting the experience of LGBTQ+ students at Hope College, and in demonstrating how we all, as a campus community, might coexist not just harmoniously, but in active support of one another, as a community celebrating our differences as much as our commonalities. One thing I remember vividly is that less than a day or so after our posters went up around campus, and a little more than a week before the activities started, I was asked to meet in person with Provost Ninehouse. I did so, but not without some nervousness. I credit the good standing and strong characters in and of our faculty advisor group, along with the provost's basic integrity for not allowing the matter to escalate further. So, in the end, we were able to keep the flyers up and proceeded with the week as planned. The other vivid memory I have of that time period is that Jane Dickie called me one day to say that our local paper, the Holland Sentinel, had heard about the series of events and was aware of the campus controversy. They asked to interview one of the group's leads. I met with Jane and after a brief discussion agreed to do the interview, stipulating that since I was still in the closet to my family who lived locally, I would only do the interview on the condition of anonymity. The paper agreed and we set up a meeting. I was very nervous, but the staff writer was very encouraging, and I was excited to finally be getting the story out. The following Sunday, just before the week kicked off, I walked into my parents' kitchen for dinner and saw the Holland Sentinel sitting right there on the counter. The article was the headline story above the fold, and my voice was all over it. After dinner, my dad was sitting at the kitchen table reading his Bible, and my mother was doing dishes at the kitchen sink. I was heading out of the house to go back to campus, and without looking up from his devotions, my father asked me, "Chris, do you know who that young man in the paper is?" I hesitated, and then replied, "Yes, Dad, I do. And I think you do too." Mom began weeping over the dishes. That was a very hard day.
Thank you. Lesbi Week felt like a genuine breakthrough, leading to discussion on campus and greater acceptance. Yet the fallout led to greater suppression. Challenged by the students and faculty organizing multicultural and gay-affirming programs, President John Jacobson and the Board of Trustees passed a discriminatory policy. It said, quote, "The college does not condone the commission of homosexual acts. Neither does it condone organizations or activities that aim to vindicate the moral acceptability of homosexual acts or that suggest by their manner of presenting themselves that they have that aim in view. Specifically, the college will not provide recognition or financial or logistical support for organizations or groups whose purpose includes advocacy or moral legitimacy of homosexual behaviors." Over the years, the statement was used to suppress student and faculty expressions that offered an open and affirming point of view. A notable admission in the statement was the freedom of staff to express their opinions. When staff members raised this, they were told explicitly, "You may not make statements contrary to the perspective of the board's policy." In at least one interaction, the staff member was reminded that she was an at-will employee and could be fired at any time. The experience of intimidation was palpable. Some of you know this beloved woman. She meant to be here and she was going to read her own statement, but her mother passed away last week. And so she is in Minnesota. Hold her in our hearts. Despite the attempt to keep the LGBTQ students in the closet, they continue to be active underground. They also found allies and support in the counseling and psychological services, where Kristen Gray was director. Kristen Gray remembers how and why the organization GLOBE was formed. Kristen Gray, showing how to be an effective ally. Despite seeking permission to form a student organization on more than one occasion, the college denied the gay students' official statement organization status. This did not stop the students from gathering and supporting each other. The LGBTQ+ students wanted and needed a group. The students creatively changed their name to the less identifiable GLOBE from the previous name, Gay, Lesbian, or Bi Equality. While Jane Dickie, me, was on the board of trustees, the question of why there was any group meeting on campus came up. The conversation turned to the recognition that queer students needed support and that Calvin College, some of who folk may be here, had such a program. And anytime you tell Hope that Calvin has it, and vice versa, it kind of spurs them on. So the board affirmed that it would be important, and as a result, Globe was to serve as a support group, and it was to be tied to counseling. And while it may have seemed as if counseling would be running Globe, that was never how it worked. Globe was led by students who volunteered to provide leadership and lead the weekly meetings. The meetings were part coming out group, part support emotional group, part activist planning group, part social gathering, depending on the needs of those who attended, the students who were in leadership, and the events going on at Hope. During those years, Globe was at times amazingly active, providing students with a relaxing place to be themselves, offering training sessions on understanding LGBTQ culture and even nomenclature, offering a safe space program, speaking in classes, organizing social events with Calvin's queer group, and dancing in Grand Rapids. Note, not dancing at Hope. Probably not dancing at Calvin either, if I could be clear on that. 1998-99. Under the chaplain, Ben Patterson, dean of the chapel program was extraordinarily successful. Thanks to a time change to mid-morning. As students here, by the way, chapel used to be at 8:30 in the morning. Yeah. Amending the class and lunch schedule, so you couldn't go to lunch during, I don't know if that's still true, pop Christian music, and a budget to triple the staff and program. However, it also began to preach an anti-intellectual, anti-feminist, and anti-gay message. Student response with faculty support led the student coalitions between the Women's Issues Organization, Globe, and a new discussion group called RISE, Refuge in Spiritual Expression. On October 7th, 1998, the torture and murder of a young gay man, Matthew Shepard, was an opportunity when one might expect all Christians on campus to come together to grieve the senseless murder and trauma imposed on all LGBTQ youth, including Hope students. Although the chaplains were invited to participate in a candlelight remembrance, they declined. One student who organized the candlelight vigil remembers that moment and the experience of being gay and disabled on Hope's campus. Josie will read Jason Sinicki's story.
The trauma of Matthew Shepard's death, lighting a candle. As an individual with a disability who also happens to be gay, I consider myself to be somewhat of a unicorn. Born with cerebral palsy in the year of America's bicentennial, being disabled wasn't the only thing that I knew was different about myself. During my senior year, I realized I was gay. I was settling into my freshman year when in February 1995, someone wrote the letters FAG on my door. There, that was it. I knew the moment had arrived. I was going to have to come out whether I wanted to or not. I called my father, my sister, and lastly, my mother. I'm so grateful I had the opportunity to know her unconditional love and acceptance, because sophomore year, my world was shaken when my mom, my biggest champion and supporter, died from breast cancer at the young age of 49. Though I had family support, the college environment was challenging for a young gay man. Eventually, I met other gay students on campus and was put in touch with Jane Dickie, who led me to the, underground as I called it, support group. We met every Sunday evening in the conference room of Graves Hall. The profound events of 1998 to 99 tilted my whole world on its axis. It started when one of the chaplains told a Bible study leader that she couldn't continue to lead her group simply because she was a lesbian. Then came the night of October 7, 1998, when a young gay man in Laramie, Wyoming, was tortured and murdered. I felt personally targeted. I remember walking around campus and noticing the other gay students. We would make eye contact, not saying anything, but going around like we all had big bullseyes on our foreheads. With pain coursing through my body because of Matthew and other anti-gay bigotry, I decided that something had to be done. Reaching out to Amanda Schneider and the Women's Issues Organization, We organized a candlelight vigil in the Pine Grove. I remember standing in the very chill autumn air, a candlelit circle of supportive friends, faculty, and staff grieving this horrible event.
Thank you. Tension between affirming LGBTQ faculty, staff, and students and the chapel program climaxed in the spring of 1999 when Ben Patterson presented Mario Bergner, an activist, supposedly ex-gay minister. Challenges arose. Kristen Gray, for example, reported that students were distressed by the chaplain's anti-gay attitudes and actions. Even as a counselor, she knew they were contemplating suicide. For example, Kristen witnessed, and this is a quote from Kristen, a student from Globe and her mother were standing in the balcony of Dimnan Chapel when a chaplain spoke about the sheep and the goats, true Christians and those who were not, and then demanded that the goats leave the chapel. The student turned to a mom and told her it was time for them to leave. The mom slipped her arm through her daughter's and stated rather loudly, "We are not goats." And they were not leaving. Several other students who had started to leave also stayed in the chapel that evening. A coalition of academic departments and student organizations rallied to provide a supportive queer message. And that's, for those of you who have a copy of the timeline, is in there. And invited Mel White, a nationally prominent man who had come out as gay and was the former ghostwriter for Jerry Falwell, to speak an affirmative gay Christian message. One student organizer describes that era. Rachel will read the recollections of Reverend Court Buchanan, now Reverend, at that time he was a student.
Recollections by Reverend Court Buchanan, gay and Christian at Hope in the 90s. My senior year of high school, I came out to my parents, who by the end of the year were beginning to understand and respect the issues I was dealing with as a gay man. I headed off to Hope College. Early on, I connected with the chaplain department led by Ben Patterson, and soon was attending chapel services 3 times a week, a weekly Bible study, and going on a mission trip to Mexico. Towards the end of my first year, I began to understand the full extent of homophobia on campus. I received threatening phone calls randomly to my dorm room in Collin Hall. A muffled and intentionally disguised voice out of a horror film would say things like, "Hello, Court, you're a homo. I know where you live." The phone calls were so persistent over multiple months that I contacted the security department, who documented every call that came into my room in order to identify the perpetrator. Ultimately, it was discovered the caller was a former Bible study attendee incensed by the fact that I was gay. Dean of Students Richard Frost led a group to adjudicate the matter. I brought audio tapes of multiple calls, and while much of the meeting was a blur, I remember the distinct feeling of dismissal, as though it was being portrayed as just a college prank, and the punishment for the student seemed rather light. On another occasion, I remember sitting down in Phelps Hall to eat lunch. I sat next to a table of about 20 fraternity brothers who for the entirety meal continued to yell out in increasing strength, "Joza Efsler." By the time I was done with my meal, I was also done with the perpetual homophobic rhetoric. I stood up with my tray in hand and said, "Joe's not a Efsler, I am, and if you have a problem with it, let me know." For a few months after that, I was looking over my shoulders for a gaggle of guys coming after me. Over time, I began to connect with other LGBTQ students on campus and helped to revitalize the old underground Les-Bi-Gay Student Union. In an effort to be a recognized student group, school administration encouraged a name change. It was clear that they didn't like such a recognizable name for the group. The name Globe, Gay, Lesbian, or Bisexual Equality was chosen, and we were able to organize as a student group under the auspices of the Counseling and Psychological Services, CAPS. The real schism at Hope came when Ben Patterson invited an ex-gay minister, Mario Bergner, to speak at the chapel with his message that if you prayed hard enough, you too could turn straight and avoid eternal damnation. Mario was unable to answer my question. Was prayer and the chance to change all the church had to offer? Apparently, from his worldview, that was all the church could offer. Through the assistance of the religion and psychology departments, Globe, RISE, and other groups, we were able to successfully invite Mel White and secure funding. Over 1 week, the chapel was was packed with crowds attending both speakers. After the emotional highs and lows of that weekend, I remember Lynn Japinga offering us of her family lake cabin to decompress. So many of the faculty were instrumental in supporting us as we faced such intentional hatred and bigotry. A particular low point was sitting down in the klets with one of the campus chaplains who looked me straight in the eye and stated that I could never be gay and a Christian. Little did he know God's calling for me as an ordained minister. Currently, I serve as a hospice chaplain supporting people at end of life.
Interestingly, the chaplain who inflicted spiritual pain on LGBTQ Christian students and their allies recently completed a book about his years at Hope College. And whilst the students celebrated and were encouraged by their action to bring Reverend Mel White to campus and the celebratory feeling in the packed chapel, Chaplain Patterson remembers this as a very dark day. It depends greatly on your vision of who God is and whether there is truly a place at the table for everyone just as they are. From the administration's point of view, conflicting Christian perspectives on LGBTQ people were to be avoided at all costs. Nevertheless, the students acted. One, Blythe Davis, created a year-long senior seminar women's studies project, a campus-wide film series entitled A Life, Not Just an Issue, a lens for understanding homosexuality, from which the library purchased 5 films, which probably are still there. You could see them. Some of them are terrific. The faculty involved used these films in their coursework the following semester. And while it was designed to be open to the whole campus, conservative administrators with influence from the anti-gay focus on the family, they really did contact the college, blocked the films from being presented campus-wide. So what happened is the faculty then said that they were holding open classrooms, and all the classrooms happened to meet in this room, and anybody who wanted to come could attend. Now, the administration was not happy with the way the whole thing turned out, so they said they'd organize a film series on campus. And so without recognizing the student who designed the whole program, the very next semester, the film series was offered again with the addition of a focus on the family recommended film. The controversy led to 2 semesters of the program and ensured that over 1,000 students saw at least one of the films, and many saw all 5. Encouraged by the overwhelmingly positive response to the film series, particularly in discussion groups that followed each film, Globe listed their names publicly in the anchor for the very first time. From their point of view, it felt like the first time they dared to be out of the closet. The students organized a petition to recognize a student group, the Gay Straight Alliance for Awareness, which was approved by the extracurricular committee and forwarded to Campus Life Board, where President Boltman pulled out the Board of Trustees' 1995 statement and pressured the board to deny recognition. At this point, the Boltman administration called a moratorium on LGBTQ programming and appointed a sexuality issues task force chaired by Jim Herrick. One of the students on that task force, get ready for this, was a young, eager student, council president Matt Scogan, destined to become Hope College's president 18 years later. After 6 months, the task force recommended that Globe continue under the auspices of the Counseling Center and the formation of a new group, the Student Roundtable, a forum for gay and straight students, under the direction of Steve Hoogerwerf and student leaders. The campus programs were presented. Steve remembers the ways the group found a middle way to continue to support LGBTQ students in programming. And I'm really pleased that Steve has agreed to come and read his own statement. And he's quite amazing if you want to read some of this about him.
Well, the student group, is this on?
Yeah, I think it's on.
The student group, the Sexuality Roundtable Forum for Gay and Straight Students, which fortunately became known as GSF.
Yep, there you go.
Was good?
Okay.
That group was launched by the Sexuality Issues Programming Committee at the beginning of 2003, and I realized that the Hope students here probably were just being born in 2003. But there was a lot of exciting things going on at Hope College in 2003 and following, and my comments are going to cover essentially the next 5 to 10 years. But Jane just picked one page of my 20-page paper. That group was launched with the cooperation of Dean of Students Richard Frost, and the initial co-leaders were 2 students who had been my former students, Bailey Martin and Rachel Hutt. Dean Frost met with the students and made arrangements for them to have a budget for publicity and a means to reserve rooms for their meetings, 2 things that were not previously allowed. Thus began what I would call an active and productive student endeavor to implement the goals of the GSF. The group sponsored lectures on campus throughout the year, educational events, and held regular monthly meetings, and was very active and alive for about 4 or 5 years after that. GSF emphasized the inclusion of students from a broad range of perspectives, and it focused on education, open discussion, and the importance of respectful conversations. This arrangement allowed students to achieve most of the goals they were seeking when they previously requested official recognition as a student group. While there was still a strong desire on the students' part for that to happen, the programming committee and the campus life board made a commitment to continue to assist this unofficial group to accomplish their goals. Having taken courses with me, the student leaders and I had a great working relationship. I met with them frequently, and they were in regular conversation with the programming committee itself and with Dean Frost. And as a result of that work, they established a mutual relationship of trust on campus, which I think maybe was emerging for the first time. Over my years of working with a variety of GSF student leaders, I've seen an example of courage and cooperation that decreased earlier fears about having such a group on campus. GSF was alive and well and was both an effective and important public presence on campus. The college both allowed and supported this endeavor, even while there wasn't always agreement on the moral issues surrounding homosexuality. We as a campus community at that time were willing to make space for this dialogue to occur, and in doing so, demonstrated moral and intellectual hospitality.
Thank you. One of the things that Steve and his group and the students were able to achieve was the beginning of permission to join the National Day of Silence. Day of Silence is an annual day of action to spread awareness about the effects of bullying and harassment of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and questioning students. In the United States, students take a day-long vow to silence to symbolically represent the silencing of queer students. Hope's participating faculty and students wore signs for that day indicating that they would remain silent. The next day, educational events, including students sharing their coming out stories, were held. These days occurred over the years, and students became more and more vocal about the needs for recognizing and affirming LGBTQ group on campus. In the spring of 2009, students Lindsay Sweet and Claire Rumbaugh-Clark, and this is Claire there with her twins, wrote, produced, and filmed a film called Ending the Silence. And one of the students who was interviewed is actually right there in front of me. Yay. I can't show the whole film. It's great, though, and it is in the library, and any of you can see it, and I'll ask the Center for Diversity and Inclusion to send out the link. You can actually see it online from now till the end of the semester as well. So student Anna Pizzamante speaks at the beginning of the film as she articulately proclaims that she will no longer be silent. Here is an excerpt.
I am constantly forced into silence. To be accepted by my family, to have educational and employment opportunities, to be seen as something more than my sexuality. But I am tired of being silent. I am tired of pretending that I am someone that I am not. I am a lesbian. Thinking of being heterosexual feels just as strange, wrong, and out of place to me as thinking of being homosexual must be to a lot of you. This isn't something I chose. Why would you think that any of us would choose this? This is something I fought, tried to change, tried to explain away. I tried to pray myself straight, go through therapy, talk to my pastor. This is something I tried to rationalize. This is something that makes my parents weep, my church judge me, my community marginalize me, my college, my country, my world tell me that I have no right to call myself a Christian. This is something that has made people walk away. This has made my identity, community, and religion fall to pieces. But this is something that has made me find the freedom to rebuild it all. This is something that has revolutionized my idea of God, freed my relationship with the earth, and taught me to love. My sexuality is not me, but it is a part of me, a part of my identity, spirituality, mentality, and rationality. Every step I take towards finding my voice, I find God. So don't tell me I'm in sin, because God speaks louder to me than any words you think you have to give me. This is not a choice, but a liberation, a gift, a healing, a calling, and a spiritual discipline. I'm tired of crying because my family won't accept me, because I have no church that calls me a sister, because my friends have walked away. I'm tired of crying, and I am ready to dance, because this is the dance, the time, and the rhythm that God has called me to. And I am not scared to believe in a God that is bigger than the Bible. I am constant.
Nope, there we go. Powerful, powerful words. Let's see what we're on now. Oh, there we are. 2009 to 2010, the administration under President Boltman and Dean Frost prevented Dustin Lance Black from giving a campus-wide talk and the showing of his award-winning film, Milk. The response was, "Hope is ready." In the fall, students, including Aaron Fisher, worked with English professor David Klooster and invited Dustin Lance Black, a gay activist, writer, director, and award-winning film producer of Milk, to campus. Other departments joined to co-sponsor. Because the administration had not heard of Dustin Lance Black, they Googled his name and apparently were taken to a pornographic site created by a former lover who was now blackmailing Dustin Lance Black. Sadly, this seemed to be the only thing that they thought of as they canceled the invitation with the words, "Hope is not ready," meaning not ready for negative nationwide media coverage like that occurred 10 years earlier when Mario Bergner and Mel White spoke on campus. The students and faculty took strong exception to this perspective. Black, after all, had been the victim of this internet site, and he was an Oscar-winning movie producer. Karis Granberg-Michelson story will be read by Maddie, and Karis is here.
This is Karis Granberg-Michelson's story. She speaks the truth to power. Hope is ready. Hope is Ready's first action was an event we held in the bowl outside of DeWitt. We made t-shirts that said, "We are ready." We said we trusted students in the Hope's community ability to engage the topic with the virtues that mark conversation at Hope: humility to listen, hospitality to welcome, patience to understand, courage to challenge, and honesty to speak truth in love. The matter received national media attention and sent shockwaves through the wider Hope community. It created energy and collaboration. Distinguished alumni from the 50s and 60s reached out to us offering support. Along the way, we discovered a key reason why LGBTQ advocacy and the efforts to form recognized student groups had been met with so much resistance. The 1995 Hope College Institutional Statement on Homosexuality. Some of us students and recent alumni had been part of unofficial LGBTQ student groups at Hope and the efforts to make them recognized. We had no idea that this policy forbidding any kind of LGBTQ advocacy existed. We set about writing a petition for the removal of the institutional statement. We pointed out that the college had no other such statements for other controversial issues. We asked them to finally allow LGBTQ advocacy as part of student groups and campus speakers so that there could be true representation and dialogue on the issue. Advocacy was absolutely necessary for the mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of LGBTQ students. What they couldn't appreciate is that lives were at stake. The longer the college refused advocacy of any kind, the longer LGBTQ students endured a mentally, emotionally, and spiritually damaging environment. To not give official places of support during such a delicate and formative time in students' lives for many was extremely damaging and alienating. LGBTQ students and their allies did find each other and did build community, but it remains a moral failing that for so long the college made no official place, no spiritual home where they could hear God loves you and celebrates you for who you are, period. So many of my LGBTQ friends at Hope grew up with the fear that they would be kicked out of their homes if they came out. While I didn't experience that from my parents, both ministers in the Reformed Church, I had no idea how to I had no idea how to be the queer daughter of the General Secretary of the Reformed Church in America. The best gift I gave my scared younger self was Hope is Ready. Hope is Ready's activism in many ways was faith-based. We represented a broad spectrum of students, alumni, and faculty, many with ties to the Reformed Church.
Oh, yes. There's more.
Sorry. We represented a broad spectrum of students, alumni, and faculty, many with ties to the Reformed Church, that we cared about the Hope community, basically saying, quote, "You can't tell us what to think or feel about this. We are the Hope community." The petition was signed by over 1,150 Hope College students, alumni, faculty, staff, members of the Holland community, the parents of Hope students, ministers, and seminary students in the Reformed Church of America. Written by students, the petition challenged the institutional statement on discriminatory and theological grounds. Hope is Ready modeled collaboration, determination, celebration, and creativity. It was a tremendous effort and undertaking. Hope is Ready was a group effort and a true example of the unsquashable power of the collective. It was a crash course in activism and community organizing. It was an act of created existence, and it was one of the most meaningful efforts of my life.
It was a meaningful time for all of us, Karis. Okay. Students recognized that there was a very large number of faculty allies at this time. They also knew that seeing Safe Stone stickers on faculty doors gave hope that they were loved and welcomed. The new Safe Zone stickers were created with the help of Carol Myers and the Super Friends. The students ran a training program to teach the faculty how they could be affirming of LGBTQ students at Hope College. 82 faculty went through the training, and students gave them stickers to put on their office doors. This was the largest visible show of support up to that point. The faculty also responded to the canceling of Dustin Lance Black and the 1995 Board of Trustees statement. Professor David Myers, who's also here, wrote a resolution which sought to remove the 95 Board of Trustees statement on homosexuality and replace it with a statement that would articulate common ground and respond to the challenges to internal moral and external morale. Internal morale was pretty low at that point. And Dave stepped up to the plate to try to find a way forward to change that. The resolution was reviewed by faculty members who had been elected by the faculty to represent them on the Board of Trustees or as faculty moderators. The group, dubbed Super Friends, included Professor Chris Barney, Michelle Bombay, me, Dee Dee Johnson, David Klooster, Joanne Stewart, and later Brad Richmond in music, and Beth Tremblay. There we are. Beth is a gifted artist, and she drew us. There we all are, the Super Friends. Actually, I was going to ask you later, but if you are a Super Friend, would you wave at me right now? Okay. Yay. Okay, so the faculty response was Provost Richard Ray, in a meeting with the informal Super Friends group, expressed curiosity about the actual discrimination gay folks had experienced at Hope. And in response, the Super Friends collected and distributed to all faculty 90-plus stories documenting the experience of being queer and ally students, faculty, and staff on Hope's campus over the years. The document, Hope College Stories of Hidden Discrimination, Giving Voice to the Silenced, was distributed to the faculty, and the Professional Interest Committee convened a faculty forum to discuss the document. The administrative response, working within the new statement, attempted to take control over future programming by reconstituting the Committee on Human Sexuality. The planned approach was to now review everything that was being presented that dealt with LGBTQ folks, and we'd have to fill out proposals, and those would be passed on to President Boltman for his approval, and the approval of a committee that was chaired by Professor of Religion Mark Husbands. Shortly after the committee was constituted, Kristen Gray and Deborah Studevant, who was then a social work professor, resigned, citing concerns of academic freedom and lack of input, particularly from gay students about the programming. The faculty generally ignored the committee, and those who were planning programs did not submit proposals to them. Our own little resistance. Okay. The students published a series on the need for healthy campus dialogue on gender and sexuality in the Anchor, and over 100 faculty and staff signed it. 2 faculty stepped up to advise the group, and then President Knapp approved that the group could form, and it was approved then by Campus Life Board. The group was called GRACES, Growing Respect, Authentic Community, and Education on Sexuality. It was time to find a way to move forward, and students reclaimed their own positive gay identities, recognized the need for this broader conversation on campus, following in some ways the way I think that it had been earlier with Professor Hugerwerf. Student leaders, Emma Fondell and Alex Swain, enlisted the help of music faculty member Jen Wolfe. They will tell their stories. Emma Fondell will be read by Lauren, and Skylar will read Alex's story. So if you just come up one after another, that'd be great.
Creating a safe space, remembering GRACES, the first official student organization recognizing LGBTQ+ students' human sexuality and gender identity. When I visited Hope College for the first time, I saw rainbow stickers with the words "safe space." Nothing was really said about them during my tour, but I remember feeling relieved. I left the campus tour feeling like this is it. This will be the place where I can grow my relationship with God and explore my deepest passions, theater, and music. I knew I wasn't straight since I was a kid, but being raised Catholic didn't allow me much room to explore that without shame, so I wasn't out just yet. During my first few semesters at college, I became more comfortable with the reality of my sexuality and discovered that who I fall in love with is not exclusive to gender. I learned through personal experiences and experiences of other LGBTQ+ students that the overall campus at Hope was not such a safe space. Through 2013 to 2015, I was the Voices editor in Hope College's student newspaper, The Anchor. In the fall semester of 2014, I decided it was time to use our voices with full support of the editors-in-chief, and we wrote a letter to healthy dialogue on gender and sexuality to the Hope College community. This letter was signed by 100+ Hope College faculty and staff who affirmed the call to upholding of Hope's mission to educate our students for lives of leadership and service in a global society, affirming the continuation of programs, education, and dialogue around issues of gender and sexuality. Finally, we were getting somewhere and getting people's attention. Katie Pritchard and Liz Martin approached me one day in the Colettes in the last semester of 2014 and told me they needed a huge favor from me. They handed me a huge 3-ring binder with the word Graces in rainbow on the front. And they asked me to continue their work to get Hope's first recognized LGBTQ+ student organization on campus as they were graduating that year. I was so honored. In the fall of 2014, I asked a few students to join me in this huge task of getting this group recognized. After many months of hard work and some pushback, in February of 2015, we celebrated our win in Grace's approval. I am telling you my story in hopes that the work, the time, the effort, and perseverance it took to get this group finally up and running will be recognized and celebrated. I am incredibly grateful to all those who came before me and after me, especially in the LGBTQ+ students who fought for affirmation, equality, and acceptance. I hope that the campus and administration continue its work in being that safe space for all students.
This is Alex Swain's perspective titled Hope at Hope, Reflections on Graces. Following years of deep shame regarding my sexuality, by the end of high school, I was finally admitting to myself that I was indeed gay. And this was profoundly liberating. As I entered Hope fall of 2012, I had a great sense of optimism for the future, for my college experience, for the friends I would make, and more. Indeed, it was during my freshman year that I met other openly gay people, and I began to slowly come out to friends I was making. By the summer of 2013, I came out fully. This was in part due to the many friends I was making and the warm and positive reception I was having while at Hope. In addition, during that first year, I witnessed faculty who were openly affirming of LGBTQ+ persons. I saw safe space stickers on doors, particularly in the natural science building where I spent a lot of my time studying biology. This environment all contributed to my ability to grow into myself more fully and to have a relatively smooth, loving reception from close friends when I came out. It was through getting to know others through meetings of Globe that I began to realize that there were large swaths of Hope that were actively opposed the full welcome and affirmation of LGBTQ+ persons. As time progressed, a group of us students, Emma Fondale, Evan Johnson, and Nicole Ladd, and me were able to work with music prof Jen Wolfe to develop something that would ultimately become Graces, growing respect, authentic community, and education on sexuality. If Hope wouldn't allow for a group actively affirming and welcoming LGBTQ+ students, perhaps we could have conversations surrounding this issue to make space for the diverse views that were held by various people and for a platform to be raised that could spotlight the lived experiences of LGBTQ+ persons. We had 2 faculty advisors, Jen Wolfe, who was affirming, and Dr. Jeff Tyler, a professor of religion, who was not. At the time, I struggled with the fact that we had to be yoked with someone who was not affirming. Yet, I am deeply grateful for Dr. Tyler's thoughtful contributions and participation in Graces, which ultimately allowed for the creation of the group. His work with us helped me to understand the deep importance of human connection that is at the heart of making progress. With Graces, we were able to have open conversation and bring in speakers who could share their stories on LGBTQ+ experience in the church and beyond. Space was created. Space to be authentic, to be able to have deep reflection and contemplation beyond simply taking past our differences or shouting different theologies or throwing scriptural citations around. This experience has impacted me profoundly and has certainly shaped much of my path, including seminary enrollment for the priesthood in the Episcopal Church.
the call and response, administrators and some faculty in the chaplains program presented traditional, controlled, and from the point of view of LGBTQ community, more oppressive Christian views. The response and the call was LGBTQ and allied faculty and students and local pastors presented open, celebratory, and affirmative Christian view of diverse sexual orientations and identities. As the changes of college presidents, trustees, and the culture occurred over these 7 years, the events show in the timeline illustrated the back and forth between the conservatives and the progressives. In June of 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that the fundamental right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples. Led by President Knapp, Hope College immediately extended spousal benefits to same-sex married couples. The following February 2016, the St. Benedict Institute, a more conservative-leaning group, offered a symposium called Gay and Christian, Exploring Vocation, Friendship, and Celibacy. Speakers encouraged gay students to accept being gay and live a celibate life. The LGBT students in Globe felt targeted by the program. The students expressed their hopes and concerns, stating that they wanted to be better understood and they wanted to feel safe. Students quickly voiced what they needed to feel safe. They needed safe zone training for pertinent faculty and staff, and they're doing it at this very time. Faculty and staff just recently went through, it might have been today or yesterday, went through some of this training. They wanted greater awareness of Graces and Globe, and at this point I would say probably Globe and Prism. Supportive campus speakers like today, and acceptance for those in the ministry minor. So they still were looking for more support and encouragement from the religion department. Students recognized the power of nonviolent direct action and engaged in it 3 times over the 7 years. The response was attempts to try to squelch student protests, which were not successful. They continued to carry them out. And I think one example illustrates this, and it was a tough example because some people that I'm very close to felt hurt by this. But in November of 2017, a coalition of 5 students and their supporters who wanted to see tangible reform and policy and funding choices on the intersections of race and sexuality at Hope College collected 95 stories modeled after the 95 Theses of Martin Luther. The goal was to advocate for policy change by collecting stories of racism and homophobia that current and former students had experienced while attending Hope. They planned to bring attention to the ways LGBTQ and BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, students had been mistreated. One of the student organizers, Joshua Cam, tells the dramatic story, and Nee is going to read Joshua's story.
Joshua Camp, Student Protests and the Prices Paid, 95 Stories. Over my senior year at Hope, I and a coalition centered around queer students of color jump-started a movement, the 95 Theses Project. In December 2017, we staged a protest showering some 800 audience members of a televised Christmas Vesper concert with flyers from the balcony of Dimnant Chapel. Our media protested discrimination at Hope and included a walkout by a student of chapel choir off the stage, holding up signs which were torn out of his hand by faculty. Copies of our posters were posted symbolically to the locked doors of Dimnant Chapel under the falling snow. The aftermath of this unsanctioned protest at a gorgeous religious concert on a very holy night were deeply divisive. Pastors like Beth Carroll at Hope Church, community leaders like Jane Dickie, and the MSO leaders of the time like Vanessa Green and Ernesto Villarreal showed up in tremendous ways of this coalition of queer POC and their allies. But student activists paid heavy prices. Losing friends, membership in student groups, and employment. all protesters endure multiple judicial reviews and probations from Hope College, as well as threats from students who try to call Holland police on unarmed queer students of color. But the controversy and conversations sparked by this action allowed the movement to gather steam, as other students came forward to share stories and call for 8 proposals for Hope College towards justice and equity on campus. It's been 6 years, but I'm so proud of what subsequent 95-story leaders and QPOC activists have achieved. Coalitions are important, something white queer people and straight POC, I hope, continue to engage in. It's not easy, but I'm adding to this chapter of Hope's history not to suggest that all is well now, that homophobia and racism are things of the past. If anything, I write to today's current queer students of color and their allies at Hope, reminding them that we often get things done best when we work outside of the boundaries drawn by those in power. We can make full use of institutional support and funding for our movements, while not limiting ourselves to their imagination of the possible. It's in the longing of other possible words that we draw all our power. It's the same imagination that made Stephen speak boldly at his trial in the book of Acts, or of Mary Magdalene convincing 11 terrified would-be apostles that an impossible resurrection has just happened. That imagination is divine work, something that happened outside of the reach of the kings and authorities of their day. And if I remember my alma mater right, that spirit might be the very best of Hope students, then and now.
Thank you, Joshua. Thank you, Nee. We are really close to the end. As a change of college presidents, let's see, is this right? The change of college presidents, trustees, and culture occurred over these 7 years in the events shown in the timeline, if you happen to have a copy. I read all that. Okay. Okay. There we are. Now we're ready. Okay. With the appointment of new President Matt Scogan, policies that had prevented full LGBTQ celebration and inclusion dropped away quickly, and I wonder if some of it was what he did when he was a student at Hope that helped that happen. This was what many of us had been working toward for 50 years. Students' need for direct action to seek their sense of place became less necessary, and celebrations could begin. For the first time, Hope College incorporated sexual orientation and gender identity as protected categories in all programs and hiring at Hope. This was a very big deal, and particularly the work of Board of Trustee member and Hope College alumna, attorney Vicki Brunn. In her presentation, she carefully laid out the biblical basis for the college to make a fully inclusive, non-discriminatory policy and make it clear that the work of enforcing and living up to this statement was the duty of the entire Hope community, which means all of us, alumni, faculty, students, making sure that this non-discrimination policy is enacted. The students were granted a legitimate, recognized LGBTQ affirmative organization on the campus, PRISM, and that's deserving of a great big lot of applause. However, students still had to organize their own Bible studies separate from the chaplain's programs in order to feel fully affirmed as they explored their Christian and other identities. The concern continues as I read with sadness the February 2024 minutes from the Religious Life Committee this year, in which one member recorded, quote, she'd heard there were individuals working on a bridge between campus ministries and the LGBTQIA+ community, end quote. They wondered what the community needed. I suggest they go to PRISM and ask. But the most problematic note in these minutes said, quote, it will be a tricky balance between the Hope ideals of promoting the historic Christian faith and affirming PRISM. End quote. Apparently, it's not so tricky for many mainline Protestant churches and progressive Catholic groups who have found ways to both recognize their own growth through history and the places it has brought them to be fully inclusive and seeking justice. The PRISM and Hope Church-supported weekly Bible study, Bible Pride, which goes on weekly here, continues to offer a place where LGBTQ students and allies can find an open place to examine their Christian and intersecting faiths. There we go. Likely there have always been LGBTQ students, faculty, and staff at Hope College. I personally know of individuals who graduated in the 50s. There's still much work to do to ensure a safe and welcoming place. But we do have a Christian message that endorses love and care, and we do have students who can be openly who they are and celebrated, and no longer forced into the closet by college policies. As Martin Luther King reportedly said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. In telling this story and many others not told in this paper, we can see that arc, and we can continue to work and pray for justice. One thing that 50 years in this struggle has taught me is that work is best done in community with others, like most of you here. If you are a member of the feminist group, West Michigan Women's Studies Council, please wave your hand. If you have a Safe Zone sticker on your door, please wave your hand. If you have been a super friend to LGBTQ and allies, wave your hand. Okay, get ready for this now. You all been sitting there a long time. If you see yourself moving for justice and inclusion for LGBTQ folks, please stand. Yay for all of you. Clap for yourselves. And let me close with prayer, the Holden Prayer. O God, you have called your servants to venture, of which we cannot see the ending, by paths as yet untrodden, through perils unknown. Give us faith to go out with good courage, not knowing where we go, but only that your hand is leading us and your love supporting us. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, amen. And amen, and may it be so, and thank you. You only have about 3 minutes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
We gratefully apologize that due to time, we are not able to do the Q&A portion of the event. My name is Avery Rufnacht. I'm a junior here at Hope College studying social work. I am honored to serve as PRISM secretary during the spring semester. I want to thank you all for coming out to listen to Dr. Dickie speak this afternoon. What an amazing opportunity to hear from such an incredible and knowledgeable person. Now, to end off tonight, PRISM would like to share some of our upcoming events. Our 3rd annual Rainbow Gala is coming up fast. It is on April 6th from 7 to 10 p.m. If you would like to attend, please check the PRISM email if you receive it, or the Instagram to find the form. This invitation is extended to all students at Hope, non-Hope students, faculty and staff here at Hope, and community members who are interested in supporting Hope's LGBTQ+ community. We would also like to invite you to our next diversity lecture, which is the Cesar Chavez lecture next Wednesday, March 27th at 4 p.m. here in Moss Auditorium. Our keynote speaker is Ernesto Villarreal, who was the former assistant director for the Center for Diversity and Inclusion from 2013 to 2017. You can see the image above for the details. We also have free t-shirts on the table over here to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the CDI. Thank you to all of those involved in this event, PRISM, the Culture and Inclusion Excellence Division, the GROW Advisory Council, and the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. And thank you for spending your time here with us tonight, and have a great evening.
Thank you.